If I, of all the people, can climb palm trees, you can too, for sure. Hi, I'm Abhi. Today I wanted to share with you my journey of how I started climbing palm trees. So I don't mean this to be a show-off kind of video. I mean it to be more like a motivational or inspirational kind of thing, or maybe this like a cool idea. So also I don't mean it to be like a tutorial, because there's a lot of tutorials out there anyway, and I'm also not an expert. So I just want to be kind of sharing my journey with you, that's all. So let me give you some background of what level I started at and how I started. So I never had any interest in climbing, so I'd never climbed a thing for most of my life. So it was pretty much at level 0, and I would never know how to climb, so I wouldn't even bother trying. But it wasn't actually me who started, it was my sister who kind of started me off. So she's been the total opposite of me since the start when it comes to climbing. She totally loved climbing. So she's the one who actually taught me how to climb branching trees. Why don't I show you the first tree which I started climbing on? So this is it, guys. Way back many years ago, this was the first tree which I started climbing on. And my sister took me in really tiny baby steps with this tree, going from one level to the next, very slowly, and I improved really, really slowly. Yep, I admit it. That's how I used to be back then. When I started off, I had very little strength, as you can imagine. So that was a major difficulty for me. So then somebody suggested that I could do some exercises to get stronger. So then I started trying to get my first pull-up, and eventually got that, and so on. I also did some chin-ups as well, and also some push-ups. Though these days, instead of push-ups, I'd recommend dips. In my opinion, it's a much better exercise for climbing. But anyway, that's what I did, and it helped a lot. So that's basically how I started climbing these kinds of branching trees, in short. And now let me tell you the story of how I started climbing palm trees. So here's how it started. It was about 3 years ago, and it was in the Nunga season. Nunga is basically the toddy palm fruit. So in that season, I had gotten reasonably good at climbing branching trees. So some of my friends took me to this area where there were a whole bunch of palm trees to see if I could climb up and harvest some fruit. So I thought at first that I wouldn't be able to climb at all, but when I got there, I actually surprised myself. I was able to manage at least 10 or 15 feet. And when I got down, I was pretty exhausted though, and I also found that my feet had a bunch of splinters and they were bleeding a little bit, but it was still pretty cool. Avoiding splinters with good technique is something I've had to learn over time. And to be honest, I should have tried to start with a tree which was a little smoother maybe, or maybe I should have tried to start learning how to climb palms with coconut trees instead. But that's what I did, and I learned the hard way. That year, I wasn't able to harvest a single fruit, but I was at least able to start climbing. The year after that, in the next Nunga season, I was able to get a little bit better, but not nearly enough to be able to harvest any fruit or anything. And I also wasn't practicing year-round either, and I just wasn't putting in enough effort to see solid results. It was only until this year that I started putting in the real solid effort. This year's Nunga season, I felt like I just had to harvest some fruit, and I couldn't let another season go wasted. It was in summer this year, and I didn't know much about climbing techniques, so I went on YouTube to learn a little bit more. I watched videos from many different parts of the world and saw all sorts of techniques with and without equipment. So now I know and use 3 different techniques. Here's what they look like. This is the first one. I learned this one about 3 years ago. Nobody taught it to me or anything. I just started doing it and I just kind of got the hang of it. And maybe it could even be hardwired into our systems over millennia. It's quite a safe technique and a very safe way to climb. Here's the second one. This second one I picked up from a guy on YouTube, and it's a reasonably difficult one to learn, and I had some trouble with it. I'm still not awesome at it, but it's definitely quite a good technique. And here's the third one. This one I picked up from our local people here, and it's definitely by far, I'd say, the most difficult one to learn, and it's also definitely the riskiest one. So it requires a lot of strength, and it's a little risky, so I even had a fall recently. But it's also a good technique. It's quite, once you get the hang of it, it's kind of effortless. Me and my sister like to call it the walking technique because it kind of looks like you're walking up the tree. So these days I like to use the technique based on the situation that I have. Let me give you some examples. So like this tree here is quite thick at the bottom, so it would be very difficult to climb up this part with the first technique that I showed you, because your legs have to go very wide and it's kind of uncomfortable and inefficient. So what I usually do is I prefer to use the walking technique, which I just mentioned, to get past this area, and then I just go with the first one after I cross about here. That makes it a lot easier because your legs kind of don't have to go this wide here. So another example could be that let's say a part of the tree has a lot of splinters. So I wouldn't want to touch my chest to that and get all scratched up. So what I'd do there is I would use the second technique which I showed you and keep my chest away from the tree to get past that area. So those are a couple examples. There's many different situations which I use these techniques in, and they really come in handy for me. Now, back to the story. As I was saying, I didn't want yet another season to go wasted without harvesting any fruit, so I started putting in a lot of effort. It was kind of mid-season, so I didn't have a lot of time left, so I had to hurry before the window got over. To be able to do anything up there, you need a bit of room. So there's all of these fronds kind of hanging down and getting in your way, and you can't see things, so you have to cut those away. To be able to do that, you need to take a knife up there, and for that what I use is this traditional little thing which people use to carry a knife up into the tree, and this was given to us by some local climber who had retired, so we didn't need it anymore. So bless that guy, because this thing is very useful. Learning to get over my fear of heights was a much slower process than getting over my lack of strength, but even harder than learning how to climb was learning how to use the knife up there while hanging on for dear life with one arm. To cut away the fronds, your knife has to be extra sharp as well, like razor sharp, so I had to learn how to be able to sharpen it to that level for it to be able to cut fronds up there very easily. Eventually, I was able to harvest my first few palm fruits, and after that, it just kept getting easier. Sometimes, though, when you try to harvest fruit from underneath, it gets to be a little bit inconvenient. So what some people prefer to do is, they prefer to go and sit at the top of the tree, and then just reach down and very conveniently cut off the bunches of fruit. That's something a lot of people find a lot easier. So learning to get up there, though, to the top of the tree is no joke. It's not that difficult physically if you can already climb a palm tree competently, but the real issue is with your head for heights and with technique. At first, I just couldn't understand how someone could go and sit at the top of this kind of a tree. I mean, it didn't even seem possible to me. Then I tried it out a couple of times and still wasn't working. Then I happened to meet someone in our neighbor's farm who knew how to climb palm trees. I asked him some questions, came back home and tried it out again and failed, and then went back and asked him some more questions. So basically what I found out is you're supposed to kind of make this narrow passage to the top by removing some of the fronds which are in your way. And also what I found out from somebody else was that you're supposed to remove the sharp edges of the fronds to make them safe to hold on to or to sit on. After I tried out this stuff, I was able to successfully get to the top. And to tell the truth, I thought I wouldn't be able to do it this year, so it was actually a surprise to me, kind of. I can tell you it's quite amazing to be up there at the top of a palm tree. You get this really nice view, and if it's a wide enough tree, you can sit there quite comfortably. It's not that difficult to get off the top, but it can be a bit frightening. Quite a bit frightening, actually, especially in those moments where your whole life depends on the grip of just one hand. So even more recently this year, I started climbing coconut trees. It's mostly the same, really. There's some difference in texture, and coconut trees tend to be a bit more bendy. Also, getting to the top works slightly differently, but I'll get to that in a moment. So harvesting coconuts isn't that difficult at all, really. All you do is you just climb straight up, and they're hanging down in bunches, and you just twist them off or pull them off with your bare hands. Simple. Harvesting tender coconuts, though, is a slightly different deal. You see, they're much younger than the mature coconuts. They're always going to be higher towards the top. The younger it is, the higher it is. So you've got to be able to get to the top of the tree to be able to harvest those tender ones which are full of water. But here's the thing, you've got to be able to do it without damaging the tree. You don't want to go around hacking away the coconut fronds because they're actually pretty big and you don't want to waste them. So how do you do it then? And how do they do it? That had been my question for quite a while, until one day I was just roaming around here in this orchard, which is right next to our farm, and I came across this friend of mine who knows how to climb these really well. So I asked him to just demonstrate to me how he gets to the top of the tree without cutting away any fronds. So what he did is he just climbed up straight using our local walking technique, which I showed you earlier, and he just climbed up real fast. And then when he got to that top area, what he did is he kind of twisted his body to get to the top. And what I mean basically is instead of trying to get in this way, your body's quite wide if you try to get in this way, he twisted this way so that you suddenly become a whole lot thinner, and then you can get in through those gaps very easily. So anyway, after I got that, we went to our friends' places who have a lot of coconut trees and climbed up and harvested a bunch of tender coconuts and partied. It was great fun. So anyway, that's my journey in short of how I got from that to that. And it's a pretty useful skill, actually. But enough about me. Let's talk about you. The whole point of this video is to show you that you can do it too. I mean, if you clicked on this video, you must be interested in climbing at least a little bit. Take my friend Vignesh for an example. He started climbing even more recently than me, but he kept trying, and look at him now. Again, it's not like he started out strong or something. He spent more of his life not climbing than I have. He hadn't climbed a single thing. And even take my sister for an example. She knew how to climb branching trees, but she only got good at climbing palm trees very recently. So my point is that pretty much anyone can do this. People have all sorts of excuses though. One might say that maybe I'm too old, or maybe I'm too weak, or let me see, maybe I just don't have it in me, or maybe I'm a girl. You know, all sorts of excuses. But my point is that pretty much anyone can do it, and these are all just excuses, and I hope I've gotten my point across to you. Before I go though, just one more thing. When you're climbing, always look first. Watch out for things like crows and rats and scorpions, bees, and all of that kind of stuff, and snakes and all of that. And above all else, watch out for electricity wires. Those are the most deadly. So please remember. If this video was interesting or inspiring for you, share it with other people. Let's get everybody to start climbing. And if you have any feedback, leave it down below. Alright guys, I'll be seeing you soon then.